Welcome to Woodwork for Humans, the series where we're making woodworking accessible, especially for beginners. And woodworkers get a hold of me all the time and they say, Rex, where can I find good, affordable hardwoods for my furniture projects? And that's a good question, but it might not be the right question. For some of the things you're making, you might not need hardwoods at all. You might be able to just go straight down to the big box store and buy some softwood construction lumber and get to work with that. Now, I know, you're skeptical. You're not sure that softwoods are going to do for your woodworking projects. But think about it for a second. What else do we make out of softwoods? Well, we make things like houses. My house is framed entirely with softwood Douglas fir, and it's been standing for 100 years. So, could we make like a footstool or whatever with yellow pine? Yeah. I think the wood is up to the challenge. Let's make this really simple. Softwoods are conifers. They have needles instead of leaves, and they stay green all year long. That's why we call them evergreens. Hardwood trees are deciduous. They have broad, flat leaves, and they lose their leaves in the wintertime. For the most part, hardwoods are over here. They're much harder than softwoods over here. But there's a big overlap in the middle, and there are a whole bunch of species of hardwoods and softwoods that are really similar in hardness. So does that mean we should use some softwoods for our furniture projects? Sure we should. For instance, I made this layout square out of poplar. It's a really common choice for beginning woodworking projects because it's workable, cheap, and pretty durable. This thing's held up great. But as good as this poplar is, consider this piece of southern yellow pine. It's actually harder than the poplar, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper. And of course, hardness isn't the only thing we care about. A piece of wood might be really hard on the surface, but still be very flexible. And that could be bad for certain applications. Let's do a little demonstration. I've got two pieces of wood clamped to my bench top here. This one is walnut, and this one is yellow pine, and they're the exact same length and thickness. The ends of the boards are about 35 inches off the ground. Right here is a 30-pound blacksmith's anvil. I'm going to put it on these boards and see how much they deflect, how much they can resist bending. Let's start with the walnut. I'll put the anvil all the way at the end so I get the maximum bend, and the walnut deflects roughly an inch. Not bad, especially for a wood that's not super hard. Now let's do the same test with the yellow pine. When I put the anvil in the exact same place and let it bend, the yellow pine also bends roughly an inch. These two woods are actually similar in their ability to resist bending, and that could be really important to know. I much prefer working with walnut, but depending on what I'm doing, yellow pine might be the economical alternative. It's still going to get the job done. Okay, but there's a little bit of an elephant in the room here. We can go get some 2x4s and make some 2x4 furniture, but a lot of that stuff is, well, ugly. I'm not going to throw up any pictures here because I'm not in the habit of insulting other woodworkers, but take just a second and Google the phrase 2x4 chair. It's okay. I'll wait. Did you do it? It's kind of grim, isn't it? I mean, there are some very nice examples out there, but most 2x4 chairs look like they were thrown together with Lego blocks. And this is completely understandable. Most 2x4 furniture is being made by beginning woodworkers. They mostly have a table saw, and they're mostly using screws for their joinery. And when you put those things together, you've got a great recipe for a lot of straight lines, right angles, and blocky joinery. But this is where the hand tool woodworker actually has a huge advantage. Even if you're a beginner, you can use complex angles, graceful components, and joinery that doesn't require any fasteners. The hand tool woodworker can cut curves without a bandsaw. We can also cut tapers without needing a tapering jig for the table saw. Instead of using whole 2x4s for our chair legs and table legs, we can pretty easily make complex, graceful shapes like this double-tapered octagon. I did all of this shaping with a hand plane, and it only took a few minutes. The fact that softwoods cut like butter, that only helped. This week, I'm building this modern high stool entirely out of Douglas fir 2x4s. Now, it's not done yet, But I think you can already see that this piece is a lot more delicate and graceful than we usually get from 2x4 furniture. I made it entirely by hand with the basic Woodwork for Humans toolkit, and that allowed me to get these nice, tapered components and good proportions. And because this chair is made out of light, stiff Douglas fir, I know that I can make the legs and the stretchers pretty thin and still know that they're going to hold up to the weight of being sat on year after year. Now, working with softwoods isn't the same as working with hardwoods. We are going to have to learn a couple new techniques. Even a stiff softwood is still less dense than most hardwoods, so these woods can chip, and the fibers are easy to crush. You'll need sharp tools and a careful approach. Softwoods often split cleanly, so it's easy for me to remove waste by knocking off big chunks. But if I want to pare across end grain, I'll need to be much more careful to avoid crushing the wood. You also need to be careful boring large holes. It's really easy to blow out the far side, so you need to go in from both sides and make the hole meet in the middle. Even with the best approach, you'll still get a few torn fibers. But my overall hole here is crisp enough that I can clean it up and get a good result. If I was too aggressive, I could destroy the whole part. Another big issue with softwood is knots. You're going to find more of them, and they're more trouble than they would be in hardwood. Let's take a look at an example. Here's a piece of Douglas fir, and you can tell there is a big knot right here. Looking at the face of it, it's not obvious why this is going to be such a big problem in woodwork. But if we turn it sideways, things get a lot more clear. The knot is where a tree branch is coming out of the tree trunk. You can see over here, this is the trunk wood. The grain lines are running nice and straight, but as soon as we get over to that knot, they literally take a 90-degree turn and stick straight out. So when we're working across the face of this board, the knot is end grain. And especially in softwood trees, these knots are typically much denser than the surrounding wood. So if I tried to plane or chisel straight across this knot, it's very likely I would just tear it out of the piece. I could ruin a whole part that way. The most important part of dealing with knots is avoiding them. As I'm breaking down my stock into rough components, I'm being careful to pick only clear wood for my legs and stretchers. A big knot in these thin components would weaken them a lot. But small knots can be planed across without any trouble. I take my biggest knots and keep them together in the stock for my seat. Once it's glued up, these knots won't be a big problem. If you do have a knot in an inconvenient place, you might want to use abrasive tools to deal with it. I got surprised by a knot in this tenon, so I took it down with a coarse file instead of a blade. This way, the knot doesn't tear out. Now let's be clear. Hardwoods are usually stronger and more durable than softwoods, and there are a lot of projects where I would only pick a hardwood. For instance, I made this milking stool a few years ago, and when I turn it, you can see that the bottoms of the legs stick out past the seat. That means as people walk past it, it's really likely to get kicked. Probably a lot, because we use this all the time. So I made these legs out of oak, and after 4 years of daily use, they still look great. A hardwood is just better for impact resistance. But you also want to notice the top, which I made out of plain white pine. It has held up to the weight of people sitting on it and all the friction of people getting up and sitting down over and over again, and it still looks beautiful. Pine is actually kind of an underrated wood just for the way it looks. It has this nice glowing quality, and it actually gets better with age. So even though I chose hardwood for part of this project, an inexpensive softwood was still great for the top. Next week, we're going to do a complete build on this high, modern stool made out of a single Douglas fir 2x4. If you want to get ready for this build, go down to the big box store and buy at least one 8-foot 2x4 made of a quality softwood. Don't buy that whitewood garbage. Nobody even knows what that stuff is. Instead, you want to buy Douglas fir, pine, southern yellow pine, or spruce. Or maybe you have a local wood that's just as good. You can look up its hardness and stiffness on the internet to see if it's going to be appropriate for our work. I've designed this stool specifically to work with softwoods, so if you spend a couple bucks on a quality wood, it's going to turn out great. Now when you're picking your boards, look at the end grain and try to make sure that it's running horizontally and vertically. You want to get away from anything that has that bullseye pattern in the middle. We call that the pith. It's the center of the tree, and any board that has the pith in it is guaranteed to split. It's going to destroy your work. Get those 2x4s into your shop and give them at least a week to settle down and be ready for furniture making. And in the meantime, maybe you want to brush up on your softwood skills. Well, I've already done a couple of great projects using just regular pine boards, junk that you might already have sitting around. I've got a beautiful, simple, dovetailed box and a no-glue, rabbited wall box. Both of these can be made from inexpensive pine boards or any similar material, and I've got really great plans. And because we're getting ready for this build, I'm going to do those plans at a discount. Go over to rexkruger.com/store and put in the code PINE25. You can buy either of those plans or both of them together at a 25% discount. And just like always, none of these videos would be possible without my patrons on Patreon. Their support makes it easy for me to take the time and do the research to come up with projects like these, prepare them, create the plans, shoot the videos, do the editing, pay my editor, and everything else it takes to bring you this content. If you'd like to be part of that amazing community of craftspeople, go on over to patreon.com/rexkruger and check out the early access and rewards that I have specifically for the people who make this content happen. And of course, I also have the join feature. You can click that right down there next to the subscribe button. And for everybody who supports this work, thank you so much. And for everybody who's watching, thank you too. Thanks for watching.